and welcome again. My name is Randy Grossman, and I am the Research Manager for Global Capital Markets at Financial Insights. And as David said, we did this program back in June, and a few months prior to that, the IFE came to Financial Insights, and they said, we want to do an algorithmic trading program. And my boss came to me, she said, you want to do that? And I said, nah. I said, I don't want to do that. There's a conference every week on algorithmic trading in New York. Nobody's going to come. Well, I'm happy to say that I was proven wrong. By the time the conference rolled around, I think, what do we have, like 600 people registered for that? And judging by the nice crowd that we have here today, it's as popular here in the UK and as interesting a topic in the UK as it is in the United States. One of the things that we did last spring is we did a survey for Bank of America Securities. And we went out to the buy side and really surveyed them about their electronic trading practices and kind of zeroing in on algorithmic trading. And one of the things that we found was that of all the particular perceived benefits of algorithmic trading, consistent performance, which is known to be a hallmark of algorithmic trading, ranked lowest amongst the buy side. They didn't believe it. I guess people don't like to think that computers can do their job. And continuing on with that theme, we also asked them what were the impediments to implementation for algorithmic trading. And number 2 on the list was just a lack of understanding. So you can see the pattern emerging here. A lot of people on the buy side just, they don't understand at this point. It's still relatively new. They're not sure when to use it, how to use it, if it even works. And tonight's program is certainly, and the one that we did back in New York in June, is an effort to try to educate and enlighten the buy side and some of the sell side as well as to what's going on. Just by show of hands, could I find out how many buy side people we have here tonight? Okay, I won't sick the brokers on you, I promise. How many sell side people? It's a lot of people in the middle. And going further into the survey, we asked them whether their brokers were providing documentation, backtest results, things like that. And interestingly enough, we found out that only 25% of the time were they always getting information pertaining to how the algorithms worked and what their backtest results. 75% of the time, they either sometimes got some information or not. And so there's a clear message here for the sell side, is that you need to educate and let people know how these algorithms are working and what you're doing to make sure that you're safeguarding their assets and achieving best execution. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to our next speaker on the panel here, Marcus Hooper from Bear Stearns.
Thanks very much. I'll just make sure this is switched on. If it doesn't work, I can shout. I have been known to do that in the past. Probably worth me giving you just a little background on myself. I don't want to bore you rigid with who I am and what I've done throughout my entire life, but I've been at Bear Stearns just a short period of time. I've only been there about 4 or 5 months. So I'm working on electronic trading solutions, as we call it, in a global context. That involves all aspects of alternative and electronic execution. I'm not the right person to be talking to about highly detailed technical aspects, so I'm going to kind of forewarn you now, because if you start asking detailed questions during the Q&A, I will undoubtedly hand it over to my fellow panelists. But my background is very much in use and application and the business delivery of these kinds of products. So I'm extremely interested in the user's viewpoint. I'm very interested in terms of what we can actually get delivered through this kind of product area. And my background is generally, my background has been predominantly buy-side. I spent 17 years on the buy-side on trading desks. So even now, indoctrinated as I am on the sell side, I do tend to look at things from a buy-side trader viewpoint. So hopefully I can give you some kind of insights into the ways in which the sell side might want to approach the buy side. I'd be very happy to share some ideas with you on that. And hopefully for the buy side, at least I'm going to touch some nerves that you may, and some issues that you may experience. One of the things that I probably identify now that I've picked up over the years is that there is a difference between the acceptance of algorithms between the US and the European markets. We'll talk a little bit more maybe about why that might be later, but I think there is a clear differentiator. And there does seem to be a degree of skepticism within Europe as to the application and use of algorithms. So I'm going to explore that a little bit. And I have no real issue with skepticism, that's fine, as long as it's objective. I don't really have a problem with that. But I like to think of algorithms and this kind of technology as a complementary tool for a trader. And that might strike at the heart of some of the issues that we encounter on both the buy and sell side in terms of why we want to consider these tools. This presentation is a fairly high-level one. I'm really just I've got 3 slides, very straightforward. The first slide is where do I think we've come from. The second one is an identification of some of these user acceptance issues. And the third one is a few of my wild speculations about where we might be going in the future in the algorithmic space, which I always enjoy because you've got 5 years to come back and tell me whether I'm right or wrong. So where have we actually been? Where have we come from? Well, when I think back to algorithms within Europe, my first experience of algorithms and algorithmic toolkit was actually within TradePoint, for those of you that remember it, back in the mid-1990s. TradePoint came and went. It didn't have a huge volume, obviously. It wasn't a major success in that respect. But from a technology viewpoint, it was an extremely powerful tool. And believe it or not, 10 years ago, they had a very highly developed algorithmic toolkit. It would integrate with separate databases. It would extract market data. But for the most part, anyone that was using it, including myself, tended to be very, very cautious. We wanted to be quite reactive in terms of the way these tools were working for us. So we wouldn't just let the machine just chunter away in the market and fire orders into the market. We weren't very happy with that. We tended to use them more as smart flags, so they would kind of identify a situation to us, and then the trader would take a reaction and say, okay, well, I'm actually prepared to do that. At that point, we hadn't had the amount of time to actually work on some of the more complex stuff like profiling and VWAP algorithms and so on and so forth. So as I say, there were issues around that, there were limitations, but we were actually I was personally using it for quite large order flow. So the kind of alpha-seeking order flow was where I was targeting this kind of a tool. But what then appeared was the simple pattern matching, as I describe it, against what I will define as a static benchmark. And I consider a static benchmark anything where you're not purposely trying to outperform the benchmark. So I would include in a static benchmark even a VWAP, because predominantly the engine for an algorithm is going to look to achieve the VWAP. It's not trying to achieve VWAP plus 10%, it's just trying to do the VWAP. If you're lucky, it will outperform it. Sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. So that was the next thing we kind of saw appearing in the marketplace. And that moved on very, very quickly because the people developing those tools suddenly realised that sending an order down, exactly 1 hour later, 500 shares again, and then an hour later 500 shares again, wasn't really an optimal strategy. And that kind of got worked out pretty quickly. So we moved into a much more sophisticated environment of pattern matching and event profiling, where we're looking much more at historical data. We're building up some very, very detailed data sets of analysis behind what's going on. We're working out profiles over the day. We're looking at that on different historical periods and trying to match things like VWAP in a very effective way. And they're very useful tools. Kind of alongside that development, we had what I term volume participation and liquidity consumption methods appearing. Now, these are very, very simple tools, let's be honest about this. This is literally a case of saying to the machine, look, I just want to consume a portion of volume over time. Just do this for me gently. And it fitted in with my point number 5 of obfuscation, because, of course, there are 2 ways of doing that. One is every hour you fire 1,000 orders down to the market. It gets spotted too late. So the obfuscation kind of crept in quite quickly, where people were randomising order flow. They were taking it a little bit more carefully, shall we say, and allowing the tools to manage that slicing and dicing of the order flow. But we've moved on a little bit further, I think, in the marketplace now, where we're seeing a much greater integration of other trading methods, because algorithms, great as a lot of us think they are, don't actually provide everything that's available in the marketplace, and they're not the full extent of every piece of technological development available today. We do have other things. We've got smart order routing, we've got various clever ways of internalising order flow and matching off order flow to provide an effective result. The final one, number 7, is the targeting of non-static benchmarks, and this is where we're getting, this is really a relatively new area. It's really becoming fairly popular. And when I think of a non-static benchmark, this really is a case of you go to a trader, or the trader comes to you and says, okay, I want to outperform. Well, what do you want to outperform? I don't care, I want to get the best price. Well, the first reaction has been, okay, let's think about implementation shortfall. And that's fine. It's a good benchmark. It's an interesting, it's a very appropriate way to manage an active alpha strategy for a trader. But implementation shortfall has been, in the short term, interpreted as the price at the time at which I received the order. That's fine. From a theoretical viewpoint of implementation shortfall, that's actually accurate, that's correct. That is what it is, theoretically. But that's not actually how people really work. What we're talking about is modified implementation shortfall, because that's what a trader requires. When you go to a trader with a very large order, the trader doesn't go, oh yeah, right, okay, I've just got the order, the price is 650. I'm going to work and do whatever I can to achieve that price. Hopefully, a very good experienced trader is going to go, no, I'm going to get the best possible price, which may be way above 650, it may be way below 650, but it infers an intelligence behind it. That's what the trader's there to do. They're adding their experience, they're adding their knowledge, and they are definitely not just saying, when it hits 650 and I can get the stock, I'll deal it. That's not what good traders do. They run the market. It's an extremely challenging benchmark, the modified implementation shortfall, and I think we've probably got a long way to go before we see some serious algorithmic development that's going to move towards that kind of product. It's an extremely exciting area, there's no question about that. And that's just a quick snapshot of kind of how I see some of the tools that have developed over the years. And as I say, I mean, my experience goes back to 1995 or so. So, I mean, I've got kind of 10 years experience of fiddling around with these tools. From a business delivery viewpoint, as a trader, this is what I want. I want modified implementation shortfall, or on some of the orders, I want a VWAP. I don't really care about the mechanics of the algorithm. It either works or it doesn't. We'll work that out after the event. That's not a big issue. Of course, we may monitor it in between as well. So let's think a little bit now we kind of have considered the environment we're actually working in and the tools we've got. Let's think a little bit about the user acceptance side and some of the issues around that. The first thing I'm going to actually tell you, and I will nail my flags to the mast here, I am bullish on algorithms going forward. I really am. And I'll give you some reasons later why I am, and they may be different from those that you would expect me to give you. First thing I would say is the algorithmic offerings today are broad, but they're not all-encompassing. That is my personal viewpoint. They do not, as I say, offer you a good solution for modified implementation shortfall. They're not that sophisticated yet. We've got a long way to go before we get to that point. And there are gaps in the area. I mean, for example, predictive capability is extremely complex and extremely difficult to do. It's no surprise that there aren't many tools out there that are really effective at doing it. But on the other side, on point number 2, hold on, aren't there too many algorithms? We do talk to clients that say, well, we keep getting all these algorithms being sold to us and we don't really understand which one we want to be using. We don't want to use the 150 we've been offered, so what do we do? I'm not right. I'm kind of right, I suppose, broad but not all-encompassing. Are there too many algorithms? No, actually there aren't too many algorithms. We're kind of jumping a step here. For any algorithm that you are given, you will have to parameterize in some form. Number 3, parameterization. That's the key issue. And that's something that hasn't, I think, been fully recognized in terms of general perception of these tools. What we're talking about is when you take even a VWAP algorithm, you get a VWAP algorithm, you've got to give it some kind of parameterization yourself as a trader. You've got to tell it how aggressive you want to be. You've got to tell it a time frame. You've got to tell it, do I want to participate in the open or the close? You've got to give it all these things, even in the simplest algorithms. Now, the question I'll ask you, I mean, for any of you that are traders, you will know there is one heck of a difference in performance if you vary those parameters. even on the simplest algorithms. So the question is, are you going to get extra value by refining the model of the algorithm, or are you going to get superior value through the parameterization? My viewpoint, personally, is it's parameterization that's key, undoubtedly. If you take a canned version of an algorithm, which is perfectly acceptable, you will get a reasonably average performance because the thing is targeted at an average set of stocks. It might have been parameterized for the financial stocks or for an index, but it hasn't been parameterized for that stock in that situation for your order. The fourth point is one I've kind of been labouring a bit already, but it's about really, what are the objectives again? The user doesn't want to use algorithms if they don't target the benchmark. Go and sell a VWAP algorithm to an active investment manager. You'll probably get a very short answer. We don't want VWAP, thank you very much. Go away. I'm actually extremely encouraged that that answer is starting to happen, because I think that says several things. I think it tells you that there's a maturity developing in the buy-side community, which is extremely good. That's a very, very good thing. They're getting very, very smart very quickly. However, think a little bit further along the line here. Traders have two jobs to do. It's my interpretation, very simply. Number one, they've got to get the job done. Number two, they've either got to minimise the cost or maximise the outperformance of what they're trying to achieve. Getting the job done means consuming liquidity. If I'm sitting there as an active trader saying, oh, okay, I'm going to find the other side of the trade, I'll sit there and I can sit there for 6 hours trying to find the other side of the trade. If I don't employ some kind of mechanism to consume liquidity in the meantime, I'm missing out. I'm not doing a very good job here. So I do see a place for mixing and matching alpha and static benchmark strategies. That's a message that hasn't got across yet. I'm pretty confident that it hasn't got across from certainly my experience. And that really is, okay, fine, work the trade. You're the trader, work the trade. If you've got this really good passive tool that will quietly work into the marketplace and can consume volume, consume liquidity and get your job done, reduce the amount of stock you've actually got to try and find on the other side, great. Use it. That's exactly what you should be doing. The final point really here is a nice contentious one, because press love picking up on this one quite rightly because it's a very interesting area. Do these tools threaten jobs? Well, maybe. Today, no. Today they do not threaten jobs. They're doing two things at the moment. They're developing an awful lot of potential work for the future in terms of refinement and research behind things like parameterization. Because if you really want to understand how you're going to outperform using an algorithm, you really need to understand the parameterization effects. You really need to understand it, because that is where your performance will come from. More work. That's what we're talking about here. And the other thing is, this development of the subject and the area is actually raising the bar for the jobs. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in the next slide. One of the examples I will also give to you is something that, for those of you from the 1990s-ish you may recall, is that we had a very interesting situation for a very short period of time where I remember in the press, I think it was on ITV News and goodness knows what, lots and lots of articles talking about neural networks. I don't know how many of you remember those. Okay? That was 10 years ago. They came. We were all going to lose our jobs as traders. They went. They're not here at the moment. Now, I don't think that's a parallel with algorithms, but if you want a cautious note to say this may not be quite such a threat, use that as an example. My prediction earlier about the bullishness of algorithms, I'll kind of explain why I feel that way. My prediction, my first prediction, is that at some point in the future, the vast majority of order flow through the financial markets will in some way touch an algorithmic process. Now, that is not the same as saying an algorithm will deal every trade. That's not what I said. What I said was what I mentioned earlier, which is that when you've got a process to do, why would you not expose the order to an algorithm that might potentially do this job for you and make your life easier as an active trader? Why would you not do that? It's crazy, actually. You must do that. And over time, I think that will get recognised. Now, the key issue is how much of that volume consumption will end up through the algorithm. And at the moment, if it was today, it would be low. because they're not sophisticated enough. They can't achieve the kind of functions we're talking about. They're very, very rudimentary in that respect. But you don't want to miss liquidity. That is the key thing. And my final slide is just really talking about the future. And this is where I get my chance to have a bit of fun and just kind of make a few more predictions. I don't know that many faces in the audience, which is a good thing, because I often get things thrown at me. But on the first one, I've said this for quite a while now, and I believe it very, very strongly. Traders' behaviour is going to change. It's going to change in a very, very big way, and a very significant way, and a very good way, I think. Most traders at the moment, and I know because, like I say, I spent 17 years being one, manage tactical processes. That's what they do. They sit there, something comes in on the phone, or it comes up flashed on the screen, and they go, oh yeah, I'll do that, click. It's very Pavlovian. And that's what so much of the business is still about. Now, there's nothing wrong with that. That's where we've been. That's where we've come from. It's very, very different going forward. It's going to move to a strategic role. You cannot, as a trader, a human trader, compete on speed, responding to a piece of market data by clicking a button, compared to a machine, processing information, gone, 5 milliseconds, done, thank you very much. It simply cannot happen. So the trader's role will evolve to be more of a strategist. They will become strategic. They will work on flow management and strategizing the plan for the trade and actually getting things done around that area, as opposed to, that's a bid, I'll do that. Very, very different situation. Something as well, which I think is going to be very exciting going forward, is the integration of news flow, machine-readable news flow. I'm not going to steal Dave's thunder because I know he's going to talk about this later, other than to say machine-readable news flow is something that I'm looking at and am very interested in. The algorithms at the moment, generally speaking, are extremely prudent. If you get a news event, they tend to shy away from it. They say, no, it's a news event. Back off, don't trade. I might muck it up. And that's fine. I mean, that's the prudency that's built into these tools. The risk factors that the clients saw years ago, it's not really like that anymore. These tools are prudent. They're very careful very, very often. The next one is about enhanced contingency management, as I describe it. And when I think about this, I really am thinking about multi-stock portfolios, moving to multi-stock portfolios in a very, very risk-controlled manner. There are very few tools around at the moment that can do that in an effective way. And most of those, obviously, are on the sell side at the moment. But that's an area that's going to grow and grow and grow. The risks inherent in large portfolio shifts or asset class shifts are enormous. I mean, again, I know it. I've worked for asset managers where you've got billions moving from bonds to billions moving into equities, which reflects on number 4, the multi-asset class thing. It will become multi-asset class. I've got a very firm belief that at the moment, the reason that the bond market trades the way it trades versus an equity market is just an accident of history. That really is it. It's an accident of history. It's the way people have done it because that's the way. I think that's going to change, but that will take a long time to change. But this kind of development in the algorithmic space will make a big impact, a massive impact. As we get connectivity to more and more different types of asset class, this will definitely become a key issue. And there are major advantages for a buy side doing this. Major advantages. The risk control alone is going to absolutely pay back in dividends. If we get back into the kind of fear factor thing, if you're a buy side trader, you might be slightly concerned, well, hang on a minute, what happens when we get these tools on the desktop and any sort of idiot can type in the keyboard and just do the order and, it's going to come out with a perfect VWAP or it's going to come out with a perfect implementation shortfall. There is a possibility. It may get extended back into the investment process. But again, I would highlight, traders will become strategists. And by becoming strategists, they will become very, very competent people, very highly qualified, probably very skilled, probably much more than they are at the moment. And that will prevent that occurring. So maybe, but certainly not yet. Something that also interests me enormously is the research into trading behaviour. I gave you the example of neural networks. Neural networks are about, okay, there's a neural network, there's a trader. What we're doing is we're cross-referencing a neural network versus a trader. We're working out what the two are doing, and we'll pattern match. They did it, didn't work. Fine, okay. But there will be much more work into this and much more developmental stuff coming out. And that's fascinating. I mean, just bear it in mind. It's happening. It's going to happen. It's going to get a lot deeper. Which kind of leads us on just my last point, which is improved intelligence. put intelligence in quotes and put a question mark. I have no idea. I really don't. I don't know whether we're talking about proper artificial intelligence or not. I do not know. I know that algorithms aren't like that at the moment. That is not what they do. And to be honest with you, let's think about the way that trading actually occurs when you give a trader an order. When you give a trader a complicated, big order that matters, that's going to cost money, what do? Hopefully what they do is they strategize. Then they formulate an opinion and a conviction behind it. If I said to you today, we've got an algorithm, and I'm not saying it, we haven't, but if I said to you, we've got an algorithm that does that prediction process, comes up with a conviction, and trust me, put your order into it, don't think you're really going to want it yet. I think we've got a long way to go before you're going to be comfortable doing that. So when I think of that intelligence thing, I think we are talking about all kinds of interesting things happening in the future, but probably a very, very long way off. I suspect a lot of this development is going to impact one area in particular. And again, this is a kind of sub-prediction. I think we're going to see some very, very big shifts in market structure. I think we're going to see some very interesting new technology come out. We've seen a lot of alternative trading systems come out, but I think that the actual markets themselves are going to shift in a very big way. Why are the algorithms being delivered, for example, just to throw it in here, why are they being delivered outside of the exchange? Why aren't they integrated as a core into the exchange? If you think about any aspect of trading, your lifeblood is data. Okay? The exchange has probably got a lot more data than you've got, and they certainly know what's going on inside the icebergs. It's kind of a natural point. So I hope that didn't bore you too much. Like I say, non-technological aspects, this is the way I look at it. I'm interested in delivery for my clients. When I go and talk to my clients, I talk about what are you trying to achieve. Okay, we've got an algorithm, maybe it will work, maybe it won't, let's talk about it. That's the way I approach it. Thanks for listening.
This on? Is this on?
Yep.
I got it. It's going to take 2 seconds to remember what I wrote. That's all right. I've managed to restrict myself to one slide today, for those of you who've heard me speak before. I'm Andrew Frere-Sanders and responsible for algorithmic trading for JP Morgan Europe. Okay. I suppose the main question that was asked, or the conference, was how do we know it works? So I thought I would, from a practical perspective, just go through what we're doing at JP Morgan, but also how, let's say, we view this space. And the first point is, or the first thing to address is, what is algorithmic trading? And then we can answer if it does actually work. Simplistically, I view it as automated trading. So that can be anything from a very simple task to a complicated one. Rules-based trading, or then quantitative trading. I think most people who will come at algorithmic trading will approach it from either of those three definitions. What is it trying to achieve? The main one, and coming to the numbers afterwards, is really resource allocation, desk efficiency. And in fact, this first benefit is tied in very much with the algorithms that exist today for the most part, which is often very, very simple. If we talked about a VUP algorithm, they may be deviating 3 to 5 bips away from VUP. So very, very simple. Anybody could code one, look at the historical volume and split the orders over the day, and that might be your expected shortfall. But they can provide a very valuable resource allocation, leaving the existing trader to look after, let's say, the more tricky part, or to take a greater view with the rest of the trade. Total cost minimization. Okay, this is, let's say, the end goal of any buy side or any trader. With algorithms being able to, let's say, slice to manage and control when you expect to trade, and with the vast amount of data that we have to analyze that trading, it is really helping to control the costs and ultimately reduce those trading costs. And the point I've put there, which is resource costs, obviously from the sell side, one of our most expensive components is exchange fees, custody fees. That's the largest part of our expense. And certainly what we've been able to do internally is to model those exchange costs and to efficiently place orders in the market with differing degrees of frequency to actually minimise those costs. And that's very relevant to the overall ability to offer this as a low-cost product. Minimising market impact, everything from intelligent order book negotiation. So clear examples are and this is where comparing different markets around the world, you'll see the value. If we compare the US, where Microsoft, I think, trades as many times as the whole of Italy does in a day, and yet on the first level of the depth, it only ever displays less than 1% of its ordered volume. So it's very easy for any trader to come in and place orders on the bid or offer and anticipate to get filled very quickly. So the kind of negotiation you're doing in the order book is minimal, versus Hong Kong, where you can take a stock that will have 75% of its entire day's volume sitting on the first bid or offer. And the trading strategies there, and minimising market impact in a country like Hong Kong, is just about the spread. Where algorithms can assist is in really just managing order book priority, monitoring where you are in the order book. Short-term inefficiencies. I think for the last 6 years, most index arbitrage done at JP Morgan has been from a computer. Spotting the fair value discrepancy between futures and stocks and then automatically sending orders has been far quicker than any traders. Looking at, along these lines, stock patterns and individual stock and how it responds to the futures as well and what this might be leading and other simple indicators, all of these making these automated and integrating them into the process is, once again, it's minimising market impact. Minimising trading risk. What's already done to a large extent on portfolio trading desks and has been done for a long time is, as part of their trading tools, rather than being just a low commission source of trading, which I think many people still believe it is, it's to take a trade in and look at the estimated cost of that trade and compare that to the riskiness of the stocks in that portfolio. And typically portfolio trades will be done by minimising the risk as you go along, i.e. trading those stocks that are providing the greatest contribution. This now taken to a level short term with algorithms, being able to perform and calculate covariance matrices on the fly and relationships between stocks, making decisions. You can't do it that quickly on a piece of paper. And then controlling fixed costs, which I've already talked about. Finally, what some people may argue is that are they providing free alpha? And this could be the suite of algorithms or tools where research houses are providing short-term indicators, analysing the recent history in the market, trying to guess where the price performance is, and actually taking on greater risk to provide that. So you could argue that's what it's trying to achieve. Going over to the latter part of the slide to say, does it work? I mean, yes, we're using it, an enormous amount. JP Morgan, I think we've got I don't know if you can read the numbers there, we've got a snapshot of, I think it's about 2 to 3 weeks worth of data. And I've just highlighted the varying algorithms we currently use internally, some recent ones, or the ones that at least you used. Spread algorithm just trades a relationship between a basket of stocks or two stocks mechanically. Simple limit algorithm, which can have varying strategies such as iceberging, hiding the order, limit or close, market on close, percentage of volume, VWAP, then manual electronic traded, and then as a percentage. So currently JP Morgan this is across our EDG business, cash business, and any users of systems, 26% of our flow is automated. More interestingly, desk 3, as I've disguised the names, is our central execution desk. Now you can see, I think in terms of flow value, it's a reasonable percentage. Let's have a look. 5.5 billion out of 38 billion. I believe in this period that amounted to something like 50% of the orders we did by number. That's only 4 traders in the entire bank. The case for JP Morgan is slightly different, and this is where I would say that there are jobs being threatened, and it's not existing jobs, but it's new potential ones. In the last 3 years since I've been at JP Morgan, its presence in equities and its market share may well have doubled. Over the time, we've kept exactly the same number of traders and just changed the way we do business. And I would say the first argument, even if our algorithms aren't, let's say, beating VWAP or they're still 1 to 1.5, 2 bits away, the total execution service we're offering to clients and at the cost we're doing it is highly efficient. This resource allocation thing is a significant benefit. The way we've had to measure this internally, and I would say to anybody looking to take on some form of algorithmic trading, and something I see quite often is you have to have in place some metrics to monitor exactly what you're doing. And in the case of internally, we not only monitor algorithmic performance on its own, but we monitor the trader performance alongside when they use an algorithm. So if a trader is putting it into an algorithm, in theory, they must have done a lot better on their existing trades. If that resource allocation argument is to stand, then we have to be able to measure the two together, and as we do. So you can see that the trader added 20 bips today, and he sent down 80% of his flow down the algorithm. Net for net, the performance has been improved. And that's extremely important. In terms of just to run through some quick examples to show you how some of our algorithms are assisting and very quick. Market on close algorithm. Very simple. It takes a stock, looks at some estimated volume that we think will happen in the auction of a particular market, calculates what we think is a sensible amount to put in there without having too much price impact, takes the residual order and then works backwards along some kind of VWAP profile. And then when you set the algorithm going from, let's say, 11 o'clock in the morning, it will pick 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock as its start time, work the order into the close, and then put the remainder as you estimate into the auction. Now, on a single stock basis, that may not have value, but we have, especially on the program trading desk, let's say, you might have 10 baskets a day across 16 markets, 500 names. You have to calculate with each stock how far before the auction you might want to begin. And what used to take, towards the end of the day, a trader's time, where you'd have to create 16 separate baskets per exchange, put it into his GL terminal. He now sends it in at 9 a.m., click a button, it trades, and it's done. So that's an enormous efficiency saving. As I said, responding to market opportunities can take long. One of the other more successful ones is our spread trade up at the top, which basically has zero manual intervention. So all the traders that used to do this business, you could say, are now dead. Simplistically, take two stocks, Vodafone versus France Telecom. We can type in any formula around that, so one divided by the other, one minus the other. This will look and wait to see when an opportunity is there on the bid or the offer, and then respond very rapidly to trade, maintaining it to be hedged. Obviously, JP Morgan, I think they have quite a large FX division, and we can take internal pricing from there. So something we're working on is doing the automated FX trading at the same time, which is say another level of efficiency. Where this adds a great deal of value, and this is as you go to countries like Asia, where currently you've got two traders, one in Indonesia, one in Hong Kong, on the phone at the same time, simultaneously trying to tell each other when to trade some spread. That's hugely beneficial. Calculating, as I mentioned before, real-time covariance, portfolio unwinding, putting all of this existing technology, optimization techniques that we use into an engine, allowing this to not only think but then to trade for you. Once again, would normally take somebody a lot of time. And then managing a large number of trades and trading smaller size. I mean, this comment really alludes to the fact, certainly in the US, which is far more exaggerated than in Europe, the average trade size is dramatically smaller. I think Microsoft might be $10,000 is the average trade size, whereas Vodafone still is £120,000, the average individual trade size. So if a trader in the US, it's almost a requisite to slice it up and work it into smaller pieces. That's still not the case, certainly in Asia and in Europe. So there's actually a bit of a need. In summary, that's it. I mean, I think that reserve the rest of the comments for panel discussion, and feel free to ask me anything. But that's a snapshot of what we're doing at JP Morgan and how we see genuine benefits today. Thank you.
Sorry, I've got... Is this working? Yeah, good. Right, okay. I need to press a button. Yeah. How do we know algorithmic trading works? So my name's Dave Cliff, and I'm kind of half man. I work for a company, and half biscuit because I work for a university as well. And I've spent roughly half my career in academia and roughly half my career working for industrial concerns. One of the industrial concerns I spent a lot of my time working for was Hewlett-Packard, and then I spent a short amount of time working for Deutsche Bank, and I'll talk about both of those things. So basically, I think that we can answer that we know that algorithmic trading works because there's evidence from both academia and from industry. So the academic stuff, some of you might find perhaps less than relevant, but nevertheless we might as well go through it. In 1996, 2 trading algorithms were invented, both of which really were invented primarily to win an argument with some academic economists. Steve Gerstad and his supervisor John Dickout invented an algorithm called GD, and then I, for my sins, invented an algorithm called ZIP. And both of these algorithms gave human-like market dynamics under experimental conditions. So you run a little experiment and the statistics you get out look like a human market when you populate an experimental market with humans. What I didn't know, and nor did Steve and John know, was that 5 years later IBM would run these robot trading algorithms against human traders under experimental conditions. So they had a proper kind of laboratory with a network set up where you could have humans and robots trading in the same market. You could have all the humans on buying and all the robots selling, or you could do it the other way around, or you could mix. You could have some robots buying, some robots selling, and so on. And what they discovered was that these 2 algorithms, ZIP and a modified form of the Gerstad-Dickout, which is now known as MGD, both of them beat the human traders, typically by sort of 5 to 7%. And in fact, ZIP came out top out of those 2. Although the thing is that IBM did the experiments, and so they don't really shout about the fact that their algorithm came second. So then, so that's it. That's the proof that it works. Okay, there's an existence proof that a piece of software can do something that a human could otherwise do, and it can do it better than a human. However, it's perhaps not the most convincing of examples, but I'll talk on the next slide about some examples from industry. So just to round off the story, over the last 7 years, I and my students when I was a professor at MIT, and then my colleagues and some of our students when we were at HP, we got bored of trying to fix these algorithms by hand. I mean, whenever you design an algorithm, it has some number of parameters, and you can kind of think of those parameters as control knobs, and it's really dull to find the right setting on each of those control knobs. So I get a computer to do it nowadays. We just use machine optimization. But then once you've got the machine setting the knobs for you, why limit the number of knobs that there are to twiddle? So recently I did some research on enlarging the number of knobs in the ZIP algorithm, and I now have a 60-knobbed version, which is of course way too many dials or knobs for a bear of little brain like myself to sit around twisting. But instead I get a machine to do it, and the machine optimizes the setting of those 60 parameters. And it turns out that ZIP 60, as it's now known, HP published the source code just as I left earlier this year, and you can find the full story of this on ziptrader.org, which is a kind of non-profit public domain website. Because there used to be a public domain website that listed all this stuff at Hewlett-Packard, but Hewlett-Packard have a standard procedure, which is the day you leave, they delete all your web material. So all my web material got deleted. And so the other thing was there was a story about all this stuff in the Financial Times in June, and I hadn't thought to buy ZipTrader as a domain name, but some other sod. Like the day the story came out, went out and bought ziptrader.com and ziptrader.co.uk and yada, yada, yada. So ziptrader.org is the place to go. And there's loads of pointers to papers by me, papers by my colleagues at HP, papers by the IBM guys, pointers to press coverage that it's received recently. We've been in New Scientist and The Economist and the FT and, I don't know, infoweek.de. But this is all kind of academic stuff, and I guess people here, they don't care about academics. They care about money. So, I can relate to you some, my limited experience of working in the Square Mile here in London. Foreign exchange is the place to be. Man, I mean, if you work in equities, how dull is that? You've got one price and you've got loads of regulations. FX, it's the other way around. Loads of prices, pretty much no regulation. This makes it interesting from an academic perspective, okay? So for those of you who don't know, there is no central exchange for foreign exchange. It's largely done on the basis of voice-to-voice, historically, over-the-counter trading. Reuters and EBS, between them, operate things which are kind of de facto virtual exchanges, but they have some issues with their technology. So the kind of price data you get out of Reuters or EBS is significantly different from the kind of price data that you get out of the New York Stock Exchange or London Stock Exchange or any of the old kind of international domestic monopolies for equities. It's also interesting because it's massively liquid. It's, most estimates nowadays talk about $1.8 trillion a day of flow through the foreign exchange markets, which means that you only need a tiny percentage gain to be able to buy a yacht. I mentioned the lack of regulations. But then the other thing, which, no disrespect to the guys, I mean, I'll tell you, the guys at Deutsche I had the best fun there. They were really kind can't speak highly enough about the people I was working with. But I kind of got onto the floor and said, okay, and I started talking about VWAP or TWAP or other things that are just common currency in the world of equities. And these people, very, very skilled traders, very skilled econometrics people or artificial intelligence people, because they were kind of buried in the world of FX, they just didn't know that this stuff was going on in equities. I mean, I think many investment banks are quite heavily siloed, Deutsche perhaps more than others. But it would appear from everyone that I've spoken to that the world of foreign exchange trading is lagging roughly maybe 2.5, maybe 3 years behind equities in terms of the uptake and penetration of algorithmic trading, which means that it's kind of open for exploitation. There are lots of opportunities there. Deutsche describes itself, I think, fairly as the biggest and best in Europe, although, of course, if there's anyone here from UBS, you might disagree. Depending on which survey from which magazine you read, it's either the best or the second best in pretty much every part of foreign exchange that counts, certainly within Europe. And if you want proof that algorithmic trading works, then all you need to know is that 70% of all spot trades that go through the London floor go through one single robot. It's a very big robot. I can tell you this with the blessing of my ex-management at Deutsche, but they did ask me not to tell you what the absolute prices were there. But I'm pretty sure that if you went and did some research on Google, you could work it out. You can probably find the numbers and you can probably multiply that by 0.7 and work out that it's really quite a large amount of money every day goes through a robot. And furthermore, I can tell you, again, with the blessing of my ex-management, that they're aggressively developing more advanced technology. So this is only the beginning. They probably do lead the pack in terms of algorithmic trading or automated trading, and again, I use it in the same sense that Andrew introduced. It's just it's trading that is done by algorithms or by machines. They probably do lead the pack, but it's interesting that in comparison to equities, there are some significant points of difference, and you might even describe them as being needing some catching up to do. So, so this is my one-slide attempt at answering the 5 questions that were on the flyer for this event. So the development process, well, coming as I did from a background not in investment banking but in the IT industry, and having worked with people that were qualified software engineers, some of that had rubbed off on me. And I would say that in comparison to the kind of software engineering that you see in the IT industry, the development process that I witnessed, and again I mean this with the utmost respect to my ex-colleagues at Deutsche, was somewhat ad hoc. It was introspection based. You basically had extremely experienced traders kind of closing their eyes and thinking, well, when I trade, I kind of do this, and if the market's going that way, I'll do that instead, so I'll write a piece of code that does that. And that's better than doing nothing, but it's not necessarily how trained software engineers would go about the problems, and it wasn't a particularly quantitative approach. So also there was this somewhat suck it and see feeling, in fact, I should, to be fair to Deutsche, the other people that I've spoken to in other banks, bear this out, that quite a lot of it is still a very exploratory kind of string and sealing wax kind of approach. The effectiveness attributes, well, profit and loss is king. Profit is much better than loss. So conservatism is favoured, and there was a general feeling that it's better to be out of the market than down in the market. So the robot that runs 70% of the flow on Deutsche's spot FX trade spends some of its time, especially in some of the less liquid currency pairs, basically saying, I don't know, I'm not going to do anything. So it kind of clears itself out, and then it gets back in when it knows what's going on. Testing prior to release. What testing? There's a story to tell, but I'll talk about that on the next slide. Well, it kind of comes into the next question. What types of data are needed for development and testing? So one issue is because there are no central exchanges pumping out reference data, data is actually scarce and or expensive. So you can go to people like Reuters or EBS and try to buy it, but you need a suitcase full of money. And if you're a big operator like Deutsche or UBS, you can record your own data, but even that might not tell you everything that you need to know. And one of the things that, one of the main points that I'd like to make today is that I think data's, if all you care about is data, then you're missing the point, really, because there's something much more important, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Again, with performance measures, I couldn't, when I came to actually answer these questions, I couldn't tell the difference between an effectiveness attribute and a performance measure. So basically, profit and loss, percentage of time in the market were what counts. I guess the other thing I'd say is coming from a technology background, working for Hewlett-Packard in their research labs, HP are fundamentally a technology company. They exist basically to patent new technology ideas and then to make money off those patents. It was intriguing when I left Deutsche to notice that the clauses on the non-competes in my contract were, don't steal any of our staff, don't steal any of our customers. And that was the end of it. Because historically, banking has been a relationship-based business. So you need good staff and you need good customers, and then you can make money hand over fist. But with the increasing penetration of, but with the increasing penetration of machine automation or algorithmic trading, banks are being forced, whether they like it or not, to become technology companies. And if you look at the kind of contracts that technology companies ask you to issue, you don't want to know how much of my soul I still have mortgaged to Hewlett-Packard for the rest of my life, in principle. Because technology companies care massively about intellectual property. They understand the patent system extremely well. And it's just an observation. This isn't a judgment. I'm just telling you. You go and look at how technology companies deal with intellectual property, both from a corporate perspective and from when they're managing their staff as they exit, and then look at how banks treat it, and I think you'll see some really surprising differences. And the sooner banks move in the same direction as technology companies, I think the sooner they'll have their backsides covered. But that's just a piece of advice. So what you need next? Okay, so 2 speculations on the future. So if all you've got is historical data to backtest your trading algorithms on, it is for sure much better that you backtest your algorithms on those data than that you do no testing at all. So if you're backtesting on data, tick, well done, that's the right thing to do. But imagine this: imagine that you've got some historical data on a day where Vodafone is flat. What's Vodafone trading at the moment? I don't do equities. So it's 20 quid. So Vodafone's 20 quid. Vodafone's 20 quid at 9 a.m. and it's flat at 20 quid to 5 p.m. So that's the historical data. Then you run your algorithm on this Vodafone data, and it comes in and it thinks Vodafone's flat, but I've got some special inside information in my algorithm, and so I'm going to unload, 20 million Vodafone. So your algorithm backtests against its data, and it goes to sell 20 million Vodafone, and 20 million little software traders buy those Vodafone shares. And what happens to the price? It's still flat at 20 quid, because that's what your history data tells you. Yeah? What would happen in the real markets? It would be very different, wouldn't it? So market impact is the thing that most people, especially in equities, care about. I mean, in FX, it's less of an issue because the market's so liquid that you have to shift a hell of a lot to start moving the price. But even then, I saw things happen where the price could be shifted by big trades. So I claim that the thing that you need to worry about is modelling impact effects. So what you need is some sort of market simulator with a good impact model, which allows you to test the algorithm on hard trades or big trades that would shift the price, because it's the price shifting trades that I think is where currently humans have the upper hand, because no one has a good way of flight testing, of simulating offline their algorithms before they go live, and no one wants to run the risk of running an algorithm live in the market that's going to do a big market impact trade and make a big mistake. But then the other thing is, if you have a good market simulator that allows you to model market impact, then you can use a computer to automatically define and refine, twiddle the knobs on your algorithm. So then you can, basically what you have is like a flight simulator. So if you're Boeing and you're designing a new aeroplane, you have this huge piece of software which tells you how aeroplanes of different shapes and sizes fly, and then you can muck around with different shapes and sizes of aeroplane and see what their flight performance envelope is like. You have no equivalent for that in algorithmic trading. You only have these kind of ad hoc practices. You have some historical data that you can use, but as we've seen, historical data isn't necessarily the be-all and end-all. So I would claim also that market simulations are useful in the automated design of new trading algorithms. And then also it allows you to start thinking about co-adaptive dynamics, because I think that's going to be the thing that people, for the last year and this year and probably next year, you can pack a room out by talking about algorithmic trading. But eventually, people will just shrug their shoulders and say, yeah, that was the big transition that happened in the first decade of this century, was people started shifting to algorithmic trading wholesale. But the question then is, when most of the agents operating in your market are pieces of software, can you exploit that information? Can you exploit that information for gain? If you can, people will. And I claim that you will be able to exploit that information for gain. What you'll be able to do is run pieces of software, perhaps coordinated packs of software traders that you'll unleash on the market, some of which are running very, very different pieces of strategy or pieces of algorithm, purely in order to probe to see who else is in the market right now, and then to adjust the trading strategies or perhaps communicate with the other trading agents in the market in order that they can game the other competitors that they're playing against. Now, there's a sense in which you see that every day in some of the equity markets or some of the FX markets, it's where there's a small number of big players, people will bully the market. Human traders will get on the phone, or they'll put bids the wrong direction in order to hide data on the EBS screen or the Reuters screen. And it's only a matter of time before algorithms can do that. And there's no reason in principle, and I'm saying that as someone who spent 17 or 18 years working in artificial intelligence and kind of machine automation, and there's no reason in principle why you can't get a machine to do that. So that's an inevitable next step, I think, at some point in the future. And then the one after that is, so I just don't think it's contentious. For order fill, for execution, humans are just doomed, all right? I mean, just live with it. As Marcus said, they're as doomed as aeroplane pilots. Now, there's two interpretations of that, and I don't know what the answer is, but I think that one of these two eventualities is going to transpire. When you get into a jumbo jet to go across the Atlantic, you're sat in the belly of a robot. And there's one very special passenger who has a very special seat, and we refer to that passenger as the pilot. And the pilot's job is to taxi the plane to the bottom of the runway, and then, in principle, the pilot can press a big button and the plane will take off. I'm not kidding, this is true. It will climb to its cruising altitude, it will navigate across the Atlantic, it will land, and then once it's at the bottom, at the end of the runway and it's taxiing, then it's not very good, because taxiing on an airport, there's lots of noise, there's lots of other aircraft and ground vehicles and all that sort of stuff. So then you need the special passenger up the front to wiggle the steering wheel. So in that sense, the pilot is redundant. However, very few people would want to get onto a passenger plane and just see a tin person up in the front, right? So there are issues of trust and accountability, which mean that we expect to see a human being in a position of responsibility. And the primary reason why we expect that person to be there is because we know that there's a tiny fraction of the time, like 1,000,000% of the time, something terrifically bad will go wrong, which the designers of the automated system couldn't anticipate. And that's the point when you need someone whose life depends on it, or whose job depends on it at least, to do the business, right? So I think Marcus's point about traders' roles becoming strategic, my interpretation of that is it will be like, if that's what happens, it will be like becoming a commercial airline pilot. You sit there, you watch the machine doing its job, and from time to time you're called upon to intervene. Now there is another possibility. The other possibility is that the job of trader goes the same way as the job of combat pilot. Now you may think that the job of combat pilot is a safe job, because it's been quite a safe job, well, it was a good job for the last century or so, but it's over now, apparently. So again, I'm not an expert in aerospace, but I have friends who tell me this, and these people work for BAE Systems, so I believe they know what they're on about. The Joint Strike Force fighter, which is the latest generation of fighter aircraft that the US is producing, and the Eurofighter, which is the kind of European consortium rival to JSF, they're widely recognised within the aerospace industry as the last generation of combat pilots that will have spam in the can, the last generation of combat aircraft, rather, that will have humans flying them. Because the problem with humans is they're kind of slow, and they're vulnerable. They can only take so many Gs, and they can only assimilate so much data at such a speed, and it takes seconds for them to reach and press the eject button, and so on and so forth. So once JSF and the Eurofighter have reached the end of their lifespans in 10 or 15 years' time, all air combat, where the existential status of nations is at stake, so this is a bit more important than whether you make your bonus or not, will be human-free. It will be drones. And I wouldn't want to, hand on heart, say, I bet the farm that traders will live forever, because I think it is possible that at the point of execution, traders will at some point become redundant. And I think Andrew's point that you're not actually going to see layoffs, you're just going to see fewer and fewer people, there'll be natural wastage, and the number of humans on the trading floor will kind of go down or stay roughly constant, but the amount of work they're doing will increase massively. So the kind of productivity per head will increase. And that's a common result from lots of forms of automation. Well, I've rabbited on for way long enough, but this is the other thing, okay? So I've been doing this kind of talk for a couple of 2 or 3 years now, and someone always stands up and says, oh, but you'll never replace a human trader, because human traders can read the news feeds and take appropriate action, and you'll never get a machine to do that. Now, God, it hurts me to say this, because when I first heard about this thing, the semantic web, I thought it was just the dog's dinner. I really didn't like it at all, because it reminds me of good old-fashioned artificial intelligence, the kind of rubbish that was peddled in the kind of late 70s and early 80s. However, I have to eat my words. I think the more I see of what the semantic web is capable of doing, the more it looks like it is only a matter of time, a short matter of time, before RSS format news feeds become readable by machines which can interpret the semantics of those news feeds. They can interpret the meaning of those news feeds and take appropriate action. So they can make investment decisions, buy or sell decisions, on the basis of news that's coming in, not just numeric data, but text data, and then they can hand that on to the kind of execution algorithm, which is, I mean, really ZIP and GD and MGD, the stuff I was talking about in the first slide, is just automated order fill or automated execution. Someone else has to make the decision to buy or sell, but I think it's only a matter of time before the machines can do that. So tomorrow, when you're bored in your coffee break, oh, you don't get them, do you? I'm an academic. So tomorrow, when your boss isn't looking, Google semantic web, and that will give you things to talk about water coolers. It's not going to happen this year or next year, but maybe within the next 5 years, it's going to be the future technology. And Tim Berners-Lee, who's a colleague of mine at Southampton, inventor of the World Wide Web, is a big pusher for the semantic web. So I guess that gives it some cachet. And now I'll shut up. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Dave. And before we start the Q&A with the audience, I'm going to be a little selfish and take the first one for myself because this is something that I've thought about over the last year and a half that I've been writing about algorithmic trading. And Dave touched on it a little bit, which is at what point are the algorithms, and feel free any and all to respond to this, at what point are the algorithms just responding to noise? When we get to 50% of the volume being done by algorithms, or 60 or 70?
Oh, I'm still alive.
I mean, is that a realistic danger?
It's probably true of human markets too. So I mean, I wouldn't want to name the percentage, but look at what happened in the dot-com bubble. I mean, are we so rational that we never trade on noise?
Right. Okay.
I'll probably add something to that, actually. There is something fundamental in the equity markets, which has been a big concern for a long time now, which is this whole issue about fragmentation. And initially, fragmentation was perceived as, okay, well, there's a trading venue over here, and there's another one over here, and another one over here. That's one form of fragmentation. The other form of fragmentation is order fragmentation. People are taking million share orders and slicing them up smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. So that issue of noise is becoming very, very significant in certain areas. Thanks. It's becoming very, very significant in certain areas because the only thing that's stopping that fragmentation going really small, to be honest with you, is the economics of trade size and the cost of individual trades. That's the only thing stopping it. If you could trade into the markets for zero cost on every single order, I guarantee the order size, and we saw a huge drop in the NYSE if you look at the stats in terms of their average order size. If that economic issue wasn't there, we would be trading down to 2 and 3 share lots in each go.
Right. Thank you. I'd like to open it up to questions from the audience here. Yes, sir.
Question for Dave. You mentioned that you optimize on 60 different parameters.
Yeah.
Each parameter is say 10 different settings, that's 10 raised to the power 60 tests, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you operate in this kind of space. What kind of computer are you using, or how?
It's just
if I could just repeat the question, and I might paraphrase, so you have to excuse me. The question is, with all the different parameters that Dave has in his algorithm, 60 different parameters, looking at the amount of testing that has to be done, what does he do it on? What types of computers, what types of systems?
Okay, so I just use regular computers, but I use a lot of them. So I normally use like a farm of 50 plus machines to do stuff. And yeah, it's a 60-dimensional real space. So it's actually a 60-dimensional hypercube. So all the parameters are between 0 and 1. And there are lots of machine optimization techniques that in principle you can apply. So it's not like, I mean, we've published the code. Or rather, the code that has been published is a very simple genetic algorithm. But the use of that was an arbitrary choice. It's much more about how you structure the space. So it's, yeah, I mean, maybe we should talk about this offline. So, but it's not impossible. Basically, it's hard. I mean, you couldn't do it. You need to pay me to do it. Okay, but other
tariff at the exchange and the settlement costs and that sort of thing, or are you just purely looking at market impact?
The question for everybody is, do the algorithms that Marcus was talking about earlier take into account exchange tariffs, fees, et cetera?
The answer is yes, they have to. There is no other way. At the end of the day, if we wanted to go down this path of ultimate fragmentation of order flow, it doesn't cost us, it costs the client. And we've got to find an acceptable utility trade-off here. So yes, it does.
Yes, sir.
Guess this question mostly for Dave, because he's seen OTC and exchange trading markets, but I'm interested in anyone's perspective. Are there kind of algorithms that you can use across these different markets, FX, fixed income, equities, and so on, futures? Do the panel think they're sort of relatively generic and can be reused, or are they very specific to each market?
So the question was, are the algorithms generic across asset class, or are they very specific?
Well, so the truth in advertising answer to that is, the kind of ZIP and GD algorithms that I spoke about on the first slide are mainly of academic interest. You have to bend them and twist them pretty horribly to get them to work in real markets. And then it's things like whether you have an order book or not, whether you have multiple sources of liquidity or not. And issues like that, I don't know. I mean, it's difficult to... At one level, you can say, well, if you treat those as parameters, then in a sense, you've just got one class of trading algorithms with different values for those parameters, like the depth of the order book or the number of different liquidity sources. Or you could say, well, actually, no, they're distinct classes of trading algorithm. My bias would be towards the former answer rather than the latter. I think that they have more in common than they have different. But
Yes.
the others might.
Sorry, Nathan.
Dave, you were talking about your ZIP algorithms, which you didn't at any point. You mentioned back testing with historical data, but you didn't mention the algorithms having to actually use historical data to make their decisions and plan their trading horizon. Whereas I think both the other speakers, Marcus is referring to VLAP algorithms and scheduling algorithms, which really take as a key input or require a forecast of volume distribution through the day. Does ZIP6 here, the work you're doing now, does it also require, is it trying to forecast volume, or is it just an entirely different approach to the prescriptive approach that I think is quite common in the industry?
Well, the straightforward answer to that is no. ZIP60 is just a knobbier version of the original ZIP. So it's just an order execution. It doesn't do any temporal processing. We have some stuff under development at Sarita Algorithmics, which I'm not at liberty to talk about until we've patented it. But certainly, one of the major limitations of the ZIP thing is that it doesn't dynamically adjust its parameters while it's trading in the market. So you have these 60 knobs, and the optimizer gives you a setting for those 60 knobs, but then they remain fixed once the thing's acting in the market. So the obvious thing to do is to dynamically vary them while it's actually active in the market, and that would probably require temporal data, both temporal historical data and also some sort of forward prediction, which you can then check the accuracy or not. Sorry, check the accuracy of after the event. So, kind of no and yes is the answer to your question, I think.
Yes. In the back with the blue shirt.
Yes. For anybody who wants to answer, do you think that the regulators and the exchange are ready for what is happening? Are they for or against? My experience is, they tend to, interfere, if you want to say, or make things difficult for implementers of algorithmic trading.
The question is are the regulators, how are they viewing algorithmic trading? Are they for or against or neutral?
I think they're concerned. I think that's the first thing to say. I think that past experience, if you go back to the 1987 crash even, a lot of the crash was blamed upon computer technology implementing trades that shouldn't have been implemented. So I think there is a definite concern, and in fact it wasn't that long ago that the London Stock Exchange put in a trading halt on algorithmic trades as well. So there is a very prudent and cautious approach, I think. Do the regulators fully understand the implications of the technology? No, and I don't think there's any reason to think that they would either do so in the short term. I think their role is to maintain an orderly marketplace And I think the level of development within the tools demonstrates that actually these tools are fairly orderly. So I don't think there's a concern on that level. Possibly my bigger concern would be the issues about market structure I was referring to earlier. If you look at the definition of multilateral trading facility within the new MiFID regulation that's coming out, I first saw it, 4 years ago. I objected to it then. I object to it now. I don't think it's a valid definition. So I'm slightly concerned that the regulator's trying to compartmentalise some of the technology inappropriately. That's my only real concern.
So from my perspective, I think the exchanges are looking at profit at the moment. I mean, we've had one exchange in a week selling market data now. I mean, we've had tick data for years, and I think some of them used to sell it for $5,000 for 10 years of history, and now that's kind of like a monthly fee to get the data. So they're certainly embracing the needs of algorithmic trading houses and responding to it at the moment with improved direct data feeds, increased capacity. So by their actions, I think they're welcoming certainly the vast increase of trades, and depending on the markets, such as Euronext, where you pay per partial fill on the trade, the smaller trade size is definitely good for their profits. I think they continually advertise that their fees are going down, but the actual money they're making is going up quicker. In terms of regulation, I think most people focus on MiFID, but there are other markets out there that are very wary of any automated trading or any DMO. In Taiwan still will not approve, and other ID markets in Asia are very far away from allowing any sort of direct access. I think overall in Europe, with the idea that there's some element of self-regulation, big brokers will bear the pain of anything that goes wrong.
Yeah, I think just from a U.S. perspective, and from what I've seen with Reg NMS in the U.S., the SEC, I'm not sure fully comprehends the level and the burden that they are placing on the sell-side firms right now in terms of being able to prove best execution through the expansion of the trade-through rule. And algorithmic trading is just adding to that complexity. So again, it's created a boom for the market data providers because going forward, when Reg NMS is enacted, your sell side is going to have to track and snap market data for each and every execution that they do. And that's just an enormous amount of data, and it's an enormous amount of complexity, and being able to go back and actually show that you got best execution is going to be a tough job. And I think that just kind of goes to the point that they don't always think through all the technology implications.
I was just going to add to one point. I mean, the one thing that I think exchanges still aren't doing is potentially trying to answer the ultimate question that is, let's say, or the ultimate goal of end users, which is, let's say, best execution. I mean, looking at algorithmic development, I point to Asia again, or even somewhere like Sweden, where you have large tick sizes. These countries overnight could reduce the trading costs for millions of clients by reducing the tick size. What will take us, development and everything else, to make that beneficial. So they're not even kind of properly at the table of providing a market in a more cost-effective way. And there's a lot they could be doing to approach what is really what clients want. Forget algorithmic trading. They want better execution. They want access to liquidity. They want to take financial views, speculation, and trading should just be something that's an element of implementation. And I think the exchanges aren't fully there.
I have a question which I'd like to get everybody's views on, and I think a couple of you touched in your presentations on the fact that an algorithm can draw its capabilities either from sort of encoding of trader mouse and sort of introspection, at the other extreme, you have a very theoretical quantitative approach. Where do you think the real value lies in future?
Both.
Can you justify that? Why?
No, I'm hedging. I wouldn't want to rule out one over the other. I think they both have value.
Yeah, I mean, my answer is both as well. I think, and this is from looking at our generation of algorithm development. I mean, you need to be able to go in and do simple things, and there are kind of rules of how you trade, and that's mostly what you get from traders initially. How you place an order in the market, how you respond. You actually get the basic pattern for order entry into that market. I think that's your And I think that has a long way to go still to optimise that. I think at the same time, reading, bringing in everything from quantitative to, potentially game theory, behavioural finance type agents that will, play a game. I think you will have a combination of both of them. And you will need to. I mean, looking at what, if you see a VWAP trader in, in Italy or in other markets, they do often trade on the other side just to generate volume. They do, the games that they play and the kind of live trading that they have, that will always be useful. Whereas I think programs will maybe do what you ask them to do initially.
I think my answer would be yes, both, but over time. I mean, I wouldn't want to speculate where the market's going to be in 15 years' time in terms of this technology, but I could foresee that we see some very advanced technology appearing where, if you like, the intelligence, the AI part of it, is significantly developed. It will be very interesting in the early stages to see how well traders and humans compete. I mean, I know Dave's given some examples in terms of his environment, but the one thing about markets is they are extremely complex adaptive systems, and it's very interesting to see human reaction, human response. I'll probably screw up the analogy, but it wasn't too long ago that Kasparov said that it's just a matter of time before chess computers beat anyone. It's just time. That's all we're talking about.
Yes, sir.
How advanced is algorithmic trading for options?
We've got options, kind of auto market making, if that's...
Maybe I can expand that question a little bit, and just in terms of the other asset classes, what do you see, or which asset classes do you see moving forward with algorithmic trading, the fastest? I know certainly you talked about FX. What about futures?
So with futures, I mean, and this has already been done by a few banks, so maybe because they're similar to equities. I mean, you get all the data, you get volume. Sorry. Futures as, that's better. I mean, I think we, amongst other houses, are already using algorithmic trading for futures, and that will be, as David said, in terms of the data we have, historical volume profiles. Let's say if you're doing simple VWAP, liquidity, the numbers very very visible, and you can use that. So that's certainly done. And for listed options, less so in Europe, maybe more so in the US and maybe Germany. In Europe specifically. There are algorithms already at work in that. Where the bulk of our algorithmic work is on derivatives is more on the hedging side. So it's back to equities, right, but it's doing it in conjunction with what's going on.
So you guys are running strategies right now that trade cash equities and futures at the same time?
Yeah.
Okay. I think we have time for one more question here.
What about the response of the exchanges globally? Like Asia is quick enough as US or Europe, or is it time lag?
The question is, how are the global exchanges responding to algorithmic trading?
In terms of systems latency and speed, it's a factor. But even in a market that's got very, very high latency of a couple of seconds, you've still got the issue, which is the same fundamental issue from a tactical trading viewpoint. Can I, as a trader, hit the button fast enough, receive the information, process it in my head, go, yeah, that's a great idea, and hit the button? Even in low latency markets, it's an issue. And again, with so many of these things, this is just a technology issue. I mean, that is the only way to see it. I completely concur with what Dave's saying about the way that investment banks position themselves versus software and development companies. I completely concur with that. That is the way the business is going.
Yeah, so certainly the London Stock Exchange is mindful of the... I need to be careful what I say here. It's something they think about. It's a concern. No one knows for sure what percentage of the orders that come in are being generated by machine, but you can kind of do some statistics that sort of hints at whether a certain order is coming from a machine or from a person. And I think actually probably it's the exchange operators rather than the governmental regulators who are worried about vulnerabilities. So this is kind of my answer to the previous question, which I didn't answer. I think if you're a national or international regulator, there's very little you can do, because the big fear is that there's going to be some point vulnerability in the system which is composed of all these independently developed trading algorithms suddenly coming together in one place. Now, one cannot rule out, unless you have a fantastic simulator, in fact, you could probably never build an appropriate simulator. You can't rule out the fact that there's some weird interaction between all these components which brings the house down. Now, I think regulators just kind of... There's always a lag between the people at the leading edge, like the investment banks and the traders and the exchange operators, and the regulators, and I think maybe that lag means that the regulators just aren't thinking about this yet. I do believe that the exchange operators are concerned about it, but I don't think anyone's got an answer. In fact, I'm not even sure there is an answer. I mean, any answer you care to hallucinate would either be too expensive or no one would want to play. So, I mean, you might hallucinate a system where everyone has to submit their algorithmic systems to some sort of clearinghouse that then check them all against each other to make sure that globally you haven't introduced some vulnerability into the market. But that will never fly. So, yeah, I think the exchange operators care. And then, as Marcus was saying about technology, I mean, the Chicago prop shops, those people are in Chicago because the transmission delay, the speed of light is not fast enough. So, and that's not a joke. Like they position themselves very close to the Chicago options exchanges because it minimises the number of switch routers that their signals have to go through. So, I think quite possibly you're going to see people buying more and more real estate just by St Paul's Cathedral. Actually, I don't know where the servers are for the NSE. I doubt whether they're there.
In the longer term, I've got no doubts that systems latency will become far, far more important. There's no question about it. Because as I say, if you've got a strategy that says, okay, this is available now, I mean, it's just who's first? Who gets there first?
Right. Well, I'd like to wrap up and thank our panelists here, and thank you all for coming today. And I think David Jaffe has a few closing remarks.
I also want to thank our panelists once again for volunteering their time. I also want to thank our sponsor, Progress of Tapama, for their support of this program. The IFE is going to be showing up a lot more in London in the next couple months and years, so please keep an eye on your email, as well as the IFE website, which is simply IFE.org. Luckily, we bought our website a long time ago. I also encourage you to look at the IFE membership application. There's a list of benefits on the back. An added benefit is I will rush you to the front of the queue for the bar tonight if you hand me an application. You may also join online. Thank you again for joining the program. I hope you can join us right outside for a wine reception. Good night.